Have you ever been betrayed by the very people who are supposed to have your back? Imagine being so excited about a family vacation, only to be uninvited at the last minute. That's exactly what happened to me, but here's the twist: I didn't let that stop me. I took control and turned the tables. How? Well, that's what I'm about to share with you. Stick around, because you won't believe the wild lengths I went to in order to make sure I still went on that family cruise. Keep watching, because by the end, you'll see how sometimes being the bigger person doesn't always mean backing down. I couldn't believe it at first. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. The whole family was going on a luxurious cruise to the Caribbean, and I had been planning it for months. We had all discussed it around the dinner table. Everyone was excited, talking about excursions, parties on board, and unforgettable memories. But then, just days before the trip, I received the call. It was from my sister. "Samantha, I hate to tell you this, but you're not going to be able to join us on the cruise," she said. I was stunned. It felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. I asked her, "What do you mean? I've already paid for everything. I've been looking forward to this. Why would you uninvite me?" Her answer. It was as though she didn't even understand how serious the situation was. "Well, Mom and Dad think it's better if you don't come. We've all decided you should sit this one out. It's nothing personal, it's just, well, it's complicated." I felt a pit grow in my stomach. "Complicated?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What do you mean complicated?" What happened? Apparently, it was a decision made behind my back, and I wasn't supposed to know about it yet. It seemed like they had all secretly talked and decided I wasn't a good fit for the trip. But nobody had the decency to tell me. I was an outsider in my own family's plans. I'll admit I was heartbroken. How could my family do this to me? After everything we'd been through, after all the times I had supported them, they were pushing me out. My sister seemed to think it was no big deal, like it was just a minor change, but for me, it was devastating. It felt like I didn't matter to them anymore. And no matter how many times I tried to talk it through with her, the decision had already been made. But here's where things took a turn. I could have taken the high road, accepted the uninvitation, and stayed home, but I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I had spent months looking forward to this trip, and there was no way in hell I was going to miss out on it. I decided right then and there, I wasn't going to let them control my life. I began to hatch a plan. What if I could get on that cruise anyway? What if I could show them that I wasn't someone to be discarded so easily? It wasn't going to be easy. I had no idea how I would manage to get on the ship without them noticing, but one thing was clear: I wasn't about to give up without a fight. And so began my journey of taking control and showing my family that sometimes the only way to deal with betrayal is to turn the tables on those who tried to break you. When the family made their decision to uninvite me from the cruise, I was crushed. But something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to just sit back and accept it. This was my moment to reclaim what was rightfully mine, to show my family that I wasn't going to be treated like a pawn in their game. I couldn't let them control the situation. The idea of backing down was unbearable to me. I thought about it all night. There had to be a way I could get onto that cruise, and not just as a guest who had been allowed back. No, if I was going to board. I needed to do it in a way that showed them they couldn't just push me aside. I needed to make a statement, not just to my family, but to myself. I started researching. First, I needed to figure out how I could even get on the ship. There was no way I was going to let their decision stand. I was already imagining the looks on their faces when I showed up, when I walked onto that ship like I had been there all along. So I went through all the logistics, all the boring details. Did I still have my booking confirmation? Could I somehow slip through without them noticing? But the more I dug into it, the more I realized this wasn't just about getting on the cruise. This was about making sure that my presence there was undeniable. So I looked into upgrading my reservation, looking for ways to make sure I wasn't just an uninvited guest. This time, I was going to make sure I was the owner of my own experience. I discovered that I could buy an exclusive VIP package that would give me full access to areas of the cruise where my family wouldn't expect me to be. A private suite, exclusive dining experiences, and even personal access to events and excursions that would separate me from everyone else. It was perfect. The only downside, the cost. But when I thought about the embarrassment of missing out on this trip, about the family who thought they could just push me aside, it felt worth every penny. So, I made the decision to go for it. The moment I confirmed my upgrade, I felt a rush of power. In a sense, I had reclaimed control. My family had stripped me of my right to be a part of this trip, but now, I was going to take back my place on my own terms. No longer would I have to beg for an invitation. Now, I would be the one in control of my destiny, making sure that I wouldn't be overlooked again. But there was still one more hurdle I needed to face: how to actually get past my family. The cruise was set to depart in a few days, and I had no idea how I was going to keep my plan under wraps. How could I show up unannounced? Would they even notice I was missing at first? Or would they be too focused on the rest of the trip to care? The thoughts buzzed in my mind like an unanswered question. I didn't want to just show up and sneak aboard like some kind of intruder. I needed to make an entrance. I needed to prove that I was the one who had control over my life. The idea of walking onto that cruise ship, walking right past my family, without them even knowing what hit them, filled me with a sense of pride and power I had never felt before. I knew I had to stick to my plan, so I packed my bags, my heart pounding in my chest with excitement. The day of the cruise arrived, and I felt like I was on the verge of something monumental. My family thought they had won, they thought they had pushed me out. But in that moment, I knew I was going to show them something they never saw coming. I arrived at the port, my heart racing. I checked in under my new VIP reservation, and the receptionist handed me my luxury credentials with a smile. This was it. I was no longer the uninvited guest. I was the one stepping onto the ship with confidence, with power. I was the owner of my own experience, and nobody could take that away from me. I had planned my grand entrance carefully. My mind was buzzing with nervous excitement as the cruise ship loomed ahead, its towering structure gleaming under the sun. The reality of what I was about to do hit me hard as I stood in the shadow of the ship. I wasn't just about to walk onto this boat like a regular passenger. I was about to confront my family, the very people who had decided I didn't belong there. It was time to show them I wasn't going anywhere. I stepped onto the ship with a confident stride, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of my heels clicking against the polished floor echoed as I walked into the grand lobby. The cruise staff greeted me with a smile, handing me a VIP wristband that made it clear I wasn't just another face in the crowd. The luxurious surroundings contrasted sharply with the knot in my stomach. I had to face them now. I had to face my family, who had no idea I was on board. As I made my way through the bustling halls of the ship, I tried to calm my nerves. I had a plan, after all, but there was always the possibility of a confrontation, a scene. I wasn't sure what they'd say or how they'd react when they saw me. Would they be angry? Would they be embarrassed? Or would they try to pretend like nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just kicked me out of the family vacation? The uncertainty made my palms sweat, but I kept moving forward. I finally arrived at the dining room where the family was supposed to gather for lunch. The large table, reserved for my family, was set up by the window with a perfect view of the ocean. The moment I walked in, I felt all eyes turn to me. My family froze, their mouths agape. I saw the shock and disbelief in their faces, their eyes widening in recognition. My brother, who had been the loudest in suggesting I shouldn't be part of the trip, was the first to speak, his voice trembling. "Samantha," he asked, his eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, trying to control the overwhelming feeling of triumph that surged within me. "Oh, you thought I wouldn't make it. You really didn't think I'd figure out a way to join, did you?" I said, the words coming out with a sense of calm confidence I didn't know I had. "I'm here to enjoy the cruise, just like the rest of you." I could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. They were all there, my parents, my sister, and my brother, staring at me in stunned silence. They had expected me to stay home, to bow down to their decision. But instead, here I was, standing tall, fully embraced by my own decision to take control of the situation. My mother was the next to speak. Her voice was strained, the disappointment in her tone unmistakable. "Samantha, what are you doing? This isn't right." We made the decision for a reason. I could see the frustration in her eyes, the guilt that had crept in, but I refused to back down. "What reason, Mom? What reason could you possibly have for excluding me? Did I do something wrong? Did I not deserve to be here with my own family?" The words came out in a rush, my emotions threatening to spill over, but I held myself together. I was no longer a child seeking approval. I wasn't asking for their permission anymore. I was here because I had earned my spot. My father remained quiet, his stern expression betraying nothing, but I could see the internal struggle in his eyes. He was torn between the decision they'd made and the realization that they couldn't erase me so easily. The silence grew deafening. I could tell they hadn't expected this kind of confrontation. I hadn't just shown up on the cruise, I had arrived with a sense of purpose. I wasn't there to beg for their acceptance, I was there to claim my rightful place. And they could either accept that or live with the consequences. As the minutes ticked by, the awkwardness in the room deepened. My sister, who had been the one to deliver the bad news, looked away, unable to meet my gaze. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of how wrong they had been. But what I realized in that moment was that I didn't need their approval. I wasn't doing this for them, I was doing this for me. The confrontation ended without any grand reconciliation. They couldn't quite believe I had the audacity to stand up to them, but that was the moment I knew I had done what I came to do. I had faced my family head-on and refused to be the one who was left behind. It wasn't just about being on the cruise, it was about showing them that I wouldn't let their choices define me. And with that, I walked away from the table, knowing this family vacation was about to get a whole lot more complicated. As the days passed on the cruise, the tension between my family and me simmered beneath the surface. I had made my presence known, but what I hadn't expected was how much more this trip would reveal. With each passing day, small moments of discomfort turned into a storm of secrets that threatened to tear apart the carefully crafted facade of our family's dynamics. At first, it seemed like we were all going through the motions. We would share meals together, participate in the daily activities, and smile for pictures, but there was always an underlying current of unease. My family didn't quite know how to act around me. Should they pretend nothing had happened? Should they apologize for what they did? Instead of addressing the elephant in the room, they chose to avoid it, and I was left to navigate a sea of unspoken words and unresolved tension. But the more I observed, the more I realized that there was something deeper going on beneath the surface. Little things started to catch my attention, small comments, subtle glances, and offhand remarks that seemed harmless at first, but with each passing moment began to unravel the truth. It started with my mother. One evening, as we were gathered on the deck watching the sunset, she turned to my sister and said something under her breath. It was just loud enough for me to hear. "I can't believe Samantha came. I thought this was supposed to be a family trip. Now it's just awkward." I froze. I wasn't sure if I should pretend I hadn't heard or if I should confront her. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the sting of her words. It felt like she was trying to distance herself from me, as if I were a burden on this trip. It was as if I wasn't allowed to be a part of the family's enjoyment, but I wasn't about to let that slide. The facade they were putting on didn't fool me, and it wasn't going to change the fact that I was there, and I was going to enjoy this vacation just like everyone else. But that was just the beginning. Over the next couple of days, I began to notice more. My father, who had always been the calm, collected figure in our family, started acting distant. We were sitting at the bar one evening, and he casually mentioned how difficult it was to plan family events like this, especially when there were unexpected guests. My stomach churned. Was I really still considered an unexpected guest in my own family? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this whole situation. Why had they really uninvited me? Sure, they claimed it was for some vague, family dynamics reasons, but deep down, I knew there was something they weren't telling me. The silence between us, the way they acted like I was the problem, felt like a smokescreen for something much darker. Then came the moment that shattered everything. One night, I overheard a conversation between my sister and my mother in the hallway outside my cabin. They didn't know I was standing just around the corner, out of sight but close enough to hear everything. "I told you we shouldn't have invited her in the first place," my sister's voice was sharp. "This trip was supposed to be about healing, about moving on. She's just going to stir up old wounds." My heart sank. It was like a punch in the stomach. What old wounds were they talking about? What had I done to make them think I was the cause of their issues? The implication was clear. I was the outsider, the person who didn't belong. And the worst part, I was the last to know about it. I couldn't hold back anymore. The next day, after hearing that conversation, I had to confront them. The time for playing nice had ended. I couldn't just sit back and let these hidden resentments fester any longer. I gathered the courage to sit down with my mother and sister on the deck. "What wounds are you talking about?" I asked, my voice steady but my emotions running wild inside. "What exactly is it about me that you think is so difficult to deal with?" There was a long, uncomfortable silence. I could see the hesitation in their eyes, the reluctance to speak the truth. My sister was the first to break the silence, but when she did, the words that came out of her mouth were nothing short of devastating. "It's not just you, Samantha," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's always been tension in the family, things we haven't talked about for years. It's not just this trip, it's everything. There are things we've never addressed, things you might not even realize." It was as if a floodgate had been opened. My family's dirty laundry was now out in the open, and I wasn't sure how to process it. There were so many unspoken issues, so many years of pent-up anger, guilt, and resentment that had been buried beneath the surface. And I was just now beginning to understand the full extent of it. But instead of letting it break me, something inside me clicked. I wasn't the cause of their problems, I was just the scapegoat. They had used me as the excuse to cover up their own failures to communicate, their own inability to deal with their feelings. And in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. This trip, this family vacation, wasn't just about the cruise. It was about me taking back my life, taking back my power, and no longer letting their secrets define me. The tension on that ship may have built up to an explosive point, but I wasn't going to back down. I had finally learned the truth, and nothing was going to change the fact that I was here, on this cruise. On this journey, on my own terms. The aftermath of everything that happened on the cruise hit me harder than I expected. What was supposed to be a family vacation turned into a reckoning, and by the time we returned to port, I felt like I was standing on the other side of a mountain. Looking back at a relationship with my family that would never be the same again. It's strange, how a single trip, a single decision, can turn everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you upside down. When I first boarded the cruise, I thought I was just reclaiming my space, showing my family that they couldn't push me out. But what I hadn't anticipated was how much it would force me to reflect on my relationships with them, and how much those relationships had been built on unspoken assumptions and resentments. As the cruise came to an end, we all found ourselves standing at the port, silent, each of us holding the weight of what had transpired. No one knew how to address what had happened. It wasn't just about me showing up uninvited. It was about the deeper issues that had been exposed, the things we had been avoiding for years. I had walked onto that ship expecting to prove a point, to stand my ground. But in the process, I had uncovered so much more. The way my family had excluded me wasn't just a casual oversight. It was a symptom of much deeper issues. They had been keeping secrets, holding grudges, and building walls for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to be a family. And I had been part of that cycle, too. For years, I had played along with the pretense that everything was fine, that we were this perfect, loving family, when in reality, there was so much more under the surface that none of us had dared to confront. During the last few days of the cruise, I spent a lot of time alone, reflecting on everything. I took long walks on the deck, stared out at the vast ocean, and realized how small the issues with my family really were in the grand scheme of things. There I was, stuck in this web of drama, but the world around me, vast and beautiful, reminded me that life was too short to live with unresolved tension. I didn't want to be part of this toxic cycle anymore. I had already made the choice to take control of my own life. Now, I had to make the choice to move forward, with or without them. But when we returned home, things weren't as easily fixed. The family dynamic had been forever altered, and no one knew how to address it. I was met with the same cold distance I had felt before, but this time, it wasn't just the silence of uninviting me. It was the silence of all the unspoken truths that had come to light. My mother, who had always been the glue holding everything together, was now avoiding me, perhaps because she was ashamed of what had happened. My father, who had always been the neutral one, was now withdrawn, unsure of how to navigate the mess we had all found ourselves in. The hardest part was facing my sister. We had always been close, or at least I thought we had been, but now I saw her in a new light. She had been one of the key players in my uninvitation, and the way she had treated me during the trip left me questioning our relationship. We had never talked about the conversation I overheard between her and my mother on the ship, but every time I saw her, there was a strange tension between us that hadn't been there before. It was as if we were both holding on to this unspoken resentment, but neither of us had the courage to face it. It wasn't until a few weeks later, after the dust had settled and I had time to process everything, that my sister called me. I wasn't expecting it, but when I saw her name on my phone, I decided to answer. "Hey," she said softly, almost nervously. "I know things have been awkward since the trip. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. I should have been more supportive, and I shouldn't have let things go the way they did." I listened, quietly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could fix things. I had to remind myself that while the trip had revealed so many painful truths, it also opened up the possibility for healing. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but if we were going to move forward as a family, it had to start with honesty. What I realized in that moment was that this trip had been a turning point for all of us. It had forced us to confront the things we had been hiding from, the things we didn't want to talk about. And while the aftermath of it all felt like the end of something, it was also the beginning of something new. We couldn't go back to the way things were before. But maybe, just maybe, we could build something better, something real. The truth was, I didn't need my family to approve of everything I did. I didn't need their permission to be myself. But I did need to find a way to live in a way that allowed me to be true to who I was, while also navigating the complexities of our relationships. The cruise had shown me that sometimes you have to step back to see the bigger picture, and the bigger picture wasn't just about getting on a vacation. It was about finding peace, not just with myself, but with the people I called family. If you've ever been in a situation where you felt excluded or betrayed by the people closest to you, I want you to know you're not alone. Sometimes, standing up for yourself is the hardest thing to do, but it's also the most empowering. If you enjoyed hearing my story, don't forget to hit that like button, and make sure to subscribe for more stories about overcoming challenges and finding your own power. Have you ever had to take control of a situation that seemed impossible? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you've navigated your own tough situations. And if this story resonated with you, share this video with someone who needs a little inspiration. Until next time, stay strong, stay true to yourself, and never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. Take control of your life, because you deserve to be in the driver's seat.